Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. I am here at the Too Many Games Expo in Philadelphia, and I am on a quest to teach people about painting minis and to really represent the hobby that we love. So this convention is about 20,000 people. It's been going for a couple of decades, and historically it's been a video game convention. So there's a lot of classic video games, a lot of arcade games, a lot of people buying and selling NES cartridges and Sega Genesis stuff. But the organizers of the convention are trying to expand into the realm of tabletop games. So I'm here to represent mini painting. I'm a special guest who's been teaching people how to paint over at the paint and take area, but I've also been given the chance to come up here on stage and do whatever I want. I've been given a couple hours up here on stage to fill time as I see fit. And I've been experimenting with what is possible to do at live conventions that'll get people interested in painting minis.
I'm here at Too Many Games to try to recruit new painters, and it's a target-rich environment. Look at all of these nerds. Most of them have never painted a miniature, but a bunch of them would probably love it if they ever gave it a try. So the convention had a big vendor hall with everything from cosplay props to old video game cartridges to handcrafted art. There was also a big arcade hall that had a bunch of free play areas, some esports exhibitions, and apparently a wrestling ring. In between those two halls was the tabletop area. This part of the convention is growing, but there was still some elbow room. This is the first time that this convention had a paint and take event, and it was a big hit. I had introduced the convention organizers to Bob Watts, who's the CEO of Atlantis Games. They make and sell the Too Thin Coats line of paint. Bob and his sons brought a bunch of paint and supplies, and they ran the event. These tables were set up in a great location. It wasn't claustrophobic, but there was still a lot of foot traffic. If there was an open seat, someone could sit down, grab a free miniature, and give it a shot. Giving people their first sweet taste of miniature painting is one of the best ways to grow the hobby. The crowd at this convention was a perfect blend of nerds to enjoy the paint and take and get infected with a love of miniatures. The tables were filled for all 3 days, often more than 40 people at once. Beldalore Games donated a bunch of cute animals, and Slapshot Showdown donated a bunch of vampires playing hockey. But those all ran out by day 2. Bob had to go and buy several boxes of Marvel Zombicide and prime them in the parking lot in order to keep the minis flowing. Paint and Take was a big success, and I'm hoping that it continues next year and gets even bigger. Now here's an entirely different kind of event. A section of the hall was blocked off by curtains and dubbed the Ruby Stage. The stage had a panel every hour with 15 minutes between to swap them out. I was on stage 3 times. The first was kind of like a TED Talk to get people excited about miniature painting. The second was a discussion panel talking about alternative war games such as Snapships and Slapshot Showdown. My third appearance was this, teaching total noobs to paint miniatures. I was up on stage with Amber and Alain from Goblins and Growlers and Jeff Stormer from Party of One podcast. They painted their very first minis in front of an audience. Now all of this was an experiment. How can we make a live, on-stage event about mini painting interesting? I wanted to see if we could actually get some painting done during a panel session. I brought some Zenithal primed minis from Arcadia Quest, and I also brought some speed paint. We were able to talk about some basic color choices and some FAQs about painting. But the main point was just to show people that it's not too hard and it's not too scary. The panelists were all good sports. Even better, they had great charisma, and they were telling the crowd about their characters as they were painting them. So the location of the stage wasn't ideal. There was a ton of ambient noise, and the microphones were necessary in order to hear anything at all. I wasn't able to record good audio, but I promise you that we really did have a lot of fun. The location of the TV screen was kind of unfortunate. Minis are very small, so a good screen is a requirement to make this work. The problem with the TV placement was that my longest camera cord couldn't reach the HDMI port from the stage. I was hoping to get live shots of the painting in progress, but instead I had to borrow the miniatures and walk off stage to my janky camera setup, and that was the only way I had to show the audience the progress updates. The event turned out fine, but a screen on stage or an even longer cord could have made it better. Live and learn. It seemed like the panelists and the audience were having a good enough time, and I think these minis turned out great. These are not bad at all for first minis, especially considering the circumstances. Okay, so for the rest of the runtime of this video, I'm gonna screen a TED Talk style presentation that I did on the Friday night. As a YouTuber, I have an urge to edit out the places where I misspoke or I forgot to say something. But no, I mustn't do that. Live talks have imperfections, and that's part of the fun.
All right, 6:30, time to get started. Thank you all for coming. We've got an interesting room here. We have one wall, and on the other side of the wall seems to be a dancing game. Well, that's all right. We do have an online audience, and I'm recording this also just in case it's good. So we'll see whether or not it gets the light of day ever again. But I'm Brent. I paint minis. I have a YouTube channel. And if you have seen me before, it is possible that you've seen this video up on YouTube. It's a video where I try to paint 5 Warhammer minis and show some newbies how to paint miniatures. And it turns out that a lot of people have watched that video. YouTube has shared it around. And I've looked at the stats, and the view count's high, which is cool, but the interesting stat is the watch time is 377,000 hours. So I did the math, divide by 24, divide by 365. That's 43 years of watch time. So some people watch for 30 seconds, some people watch the whole half-hour video, some people watch half. You add it all up, it's 43 years. I'm still in my 30s, so that guy in the corner who existed for half an hour is older than me. And he has been more places than I will ever be, met more people than I will ever meet, and taught a lot of people to paint minis. And so there's some real meaning of life kind of questions getting involved there. That guy is my child, and he's the most important thing I've ever done. And how does that make me feel? I actually feel pretty good about it. Miniature painting is an outstanding hobby. I think it's one of the best pastimes that a person can have. And yeah, so when you paint minis, the hobby of miniature painting, which I will refer to as the hobby from now on, is great. You acquire cool minis, you acquire paints and paintbrushes and tools. You put paint on the brushes, you put paint on the models. You spend hours getting to know the character that you're working on. And yeah, during that time, you're sitting in your chair, you're sinking into your chair, you're relaxed, you're focused, and you're practicing. You're building that muscle memory. You're getting better at a skill. Sometimes you make real breakthroughs and you really get good at a technique. You figure out something new, you figure out a new art style. And as you're going, you are really accomplishing something. You are building a collection of models that you've put time into, that have meaning and value. And if you want, you can make this a social hobby as well. You can go to the paint and take area, you can hang out with people, you can go and play games. This is a fantastic hobby. All right, so I want to cruise through here and show off some Instagram art of other people. And making the point that there are miniatures for anything and everything. If there is an IP that you like, there are miniatures for it. So here's Marvel Crisis Protocol, painted by Ghost Bear. Here are some Star Wars Legion minis, painted by Born Miniatures. Here are some Star Trek miniatures. I'm excited to get going on my Klingon squad. I got the Chancellor Gowron set. And I'm gonna paint Chancellor Gowron's eyes huge. It's gonna be awesome. Darkest Dungeon. Now, I still think of Darkest Dungeon as being like a small indie game, but there are minis for it, and Craft World Studio painted them very nicely. These, okay, well this is made by a creator called Becca 3D. and it's from a series called Kaijumon. They remind me of something. I can't really put my finger on it, but they're cool. They're cool. So no matter what it is that you're interested in, there are either official minis for that thing or perhaps unofficial minis. Oh, these are new. So this is from the old web series, The Guild, and these have just come out recently, but Felicia Day and a sculptor have been working on these, and here is Codex and Vork, painted by Monster Den Minis. Yeah, so Instagram, in the past at least, has been a very good platform for finding miniatures that get you excited and finding paint jobs that get you excited. Recently, Instagram has gone more and more into like shorts, and my Instagram used to be all miniatures. Now it is mostly cats. Second is orangutan videos, and then miniatures. But if you use it correctly and don't fall into the algorithm traps, you can still get a lot of cool miniature content on Instagram. You can make a miniature of anything. So 3D printing has gotten good. And if you can find someone with skills at 3D modeling, you can make any miniature that you want. This miniature is made by Archvillain Games. They sculpted a Yeti, and they gave the Yeti 2 battle axes and 2 cats, and they put my face on the Yeti. And I printed that file, and I painted the miniature, and anything you can imagine, you can get a model of it, for better or worse. 3D printing is good now. 3D printing is affordable. It's still messy and like a little bit of a hassle, but it's pretty easy to find a friend with a 3D printer. So anything that you want to paint, you can get into it. Hobbies in a good place. Here is Hero Forge. So there's a couple of companies that do this, either Hero Forge, Eldritch Foundry, I think there might be a few others, but it's a web browser-based character builder where you can get your face and your equipment and pose the character, and then you can either pay the company to print it and send it to you, or you can buy the STL file and print it yourself. So a group of friends and I were playing D&D. We did this for our characters. This is Kavan, and got Kavan printed out, and here I am trying to paint him up. And this is the phase where you get to really know who the character is. As you're spending a couple of hours putting paint on the model, you're thinking about things. What colors would Kavan wear? Is he wearing old leather or new leather? Does he bathe or is he covered in dirt? If I look closely, his hairline is receding. Does this affect Kavan? Is that the reason for his low charisma score? What's going on with Kavan? What do we need to know about him? So there's a back and forth between creating the character and painting the character, and it all goes hand in hand, and it's great. So printed Kavan at a couple of different scales, and also used the character builder to give him a battle pose and a tavern pose. So the scale right next to the D20 there, that's a normal scale for minis. That's very common for Warhammer or D&D, but you can get minis or models at different scales, and it can be fun to do that, but the smaller ones are the standards. So this was my character Chaz. This is Penny, the Gnome Ranger. And this is Dolan. Dolan is the rogue of the party. He's a little bit over the hill. He's put on a few pounds, and the player who played him played level 1 as kind of a 40-something, a little bit pudgy, but getting back into the game. So this is Dolan's tavern gear. We also made him with his adventuring gear. These are his leathers, and if he really puts his mind to it, he can still squeeze into his leathers, but you know, sometimes his sciatica plays up and he's got a bit of a backache, and it can be a lot of fun putting the character into the models and thinking about, you know, if he's failing a stealth check, it's because his knees are popping or something's gone terribly wrong in his back. And here we are. Now, the rest of the story is that our party has never played with miniatures. We've done this entirely theater of the mind. And yet, it is so nice to have miniatures for all of our characters. It is so nice to put them in a little tavern scene, put them around a table, you know, have a mysterious looking cloaked figure in the background. Miniatures make games better. Playing games is fun. Playing games with painted miniatures, more fun. Stands to reason. All right, you can get miniatures of anything. Here is the Convention Croc by Crocodile Games. He's got his soda pop and his convention badge and his t-shirt from the convention. He's walking around with a bag of all his swag. And since you are at a convention, this is an outstanding time to walk around and learn about new miniatures. Learn about companies that are producing minis and games that you haven't seen before. Check out the paint and take, check out the various vendors. If people are playing games, stop by, say hello, and see what they're working on. Oh yeah, don't forget to stop by the paint and take. I spent a few hours there today, and it is going really well. So Too Thin Coats has been sponsoring the paint and take. They brought all the paints, and various companies have chipped in some minis, and folks have been having a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to do some really good recruitment for this hobby this weekend. All right. So we spent some time sleeping, we spent some time at work. Presumably some of us have families and friends and other commitments. And then hopefully we have a little bit of time left over that is ours, that we can use for our interests and pursuits and pastimes. A lot of different things we can do out there in the world, from motorsports to golf and woodworking or knitting, whittling. But miniature painting is the best hobby. That is a YouTuber kind of crazy claim to make, but we're going to back it up here. Miniature painting is the best possible use of free time that you can have. It's accessible to most people. Low barrier to entry. Your knees don't need to work to be able to paint minis. You can be a child and paint miniatures, or a retired person and paint miniatures. That doesn't work with pickup basketball, for example. Miniature painting is a creative outlet, and it's a gateway into the world of art that you might not have considered before. It's relaxing. It reduces stress. Presumably, it lowers blood pressure. It's productive, it's collectible, you are producing tiny little works of art that you get to save forever and look back with fondness. It connects to other hobbies, especially gaming. And there are minis of everything. They make games better. Now, the hobby is also quiet and portable and flexible. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to bed, you can go and paint some models until you're sleepy again. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you should not turn on your bench saw. You should not turn on your angle grinder. Now, it's also as social as you want it to be. You can sit there in the middle of the night all alone, have some quiet time, paint some minis, or you can hop on a Discord call and do like a hobby hangout. And of course, you can be social by going to conventions, playing games, all that stuff. This is a hobby with longevity. In 30 years or whatever, pick your arbitrary number, the hobby will still be here. Your collection of models will still be here. Again, this is something that you can do into old age if that's what you choose to do. And it's fun. This is a fun hobby. All right, real quick, it pairs with all kinds of other hobbies. So if you're into Lego, Gundam, doll houses, scale model kits, 3D printing, sculpture, 2D art, photography, board games, tabletop war games, tabletop RPGs, all of those things involve skills that also benefit miniature painting. There's a lot of crossover with all of those. If you already like one of those things, you will probably enjoy miniature painting. And if you already enjoy miniature painting, you might like some of those other hobbies. Hard transition.
Okay. Last couple of years, D&D has had some rough PR, I'd say. And one of the famous quotes that came out about a year and a half ago, this is from the former president of Wizards of the Coast, and Cynthia Williams said something in an investor webinar, something to the effect of Dungeons and Dragons is under-monetized. And that got a lot of people upset on the internet because here's a corporation looking to extract more money from the fans, and people got very upset, understandably. So here's the thing, Cynthia's kind of right, and I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. So if you want to get into D&D, realistically, you need the starter set for 5th edition. That was the Lost Minds of Phandelver, and you also got some dice and some character sheets in that box. And realistically, as a player, you should also get the player's handbook, and that gives you all the rules you need for all the classes. You got your dice, you got your character sheets, you're good, you're set. And, you know, the DM will probably buy a few extra books, a monster manual, DM's guide, maybe a couple adventure books. But most of the people who play D&D are not DMs, and they don't need very much at all. This is 5th edition D&D, launched in 2014, so it's been going for 10 years. There's a $30 box and a $50 handbook, so that hobby could cost $8 per year, and Cynthia Williams isn't super happy with that. But here's the thing, we all know that we spend more than $8 a year on our hobbies, which brings me to dice towers. And again, I'm going somewhere with this. This is a dice tower. It performs the job of rolling your dice for you. You put dice in at the top of the tower there, and some shenanigans happen in between, and the dice comes out the bottom, and you can read the number on the dice. Exhibit B, we have a hexagonal dice tray from Wormwood. This is made out of Bolivian rosewood. This is so you can roll your dice into a little tray. Dice don't go all willy-nilly all over the place. And for the dice themselves, you can get titanium dice for $500 from Norse Foundry. And I was putting this slide together, and I was going to tell a joke about sandalwood DM screens. I couldn't find any sandalwood DM screens, and I was going to tell a joke about Damascus steel dice. Damascus steel dice exist. You can spend $400 and something on some Damascus steel dice. Okay. Promise I'm going somewhere with this. I'm not making fun of anybody. And I'm especially not making fun of the companies that put these out. They are clearly fulfilling a need. People are buying these because these add something to the hobby experience for people who love RPGs. A couple of points to make here. And the first is that when we have a hobby that we love and we're excited about and we're involved with, we want to get into it. We want to dive in with both feet. We want to be involved in every way we can. And I think RPGs and D&D are just a really interesting example that shows if you have a hobby that's naturally pretty cheap, theater of the mind, pen and paper RPGs can be extremely affordable hobbies, but there are plenty of vendors here today that are selling accessories to help you roll dice, which is cool. People get excited about that. But it also shows in some ways the limitations of the RPG hobby, because there's something that's not being fulfilled. People want to get even deeper than just playing the game. And a way to get even deeper into RPGs is to get some minis. If you have $500 to spend on new dice, now's the time to learn how to paint minis. Realistically, getting into minis does not cost $500. Realistically, getting into minis costs about the same amount as the D&D Player's Handbook. So this right here is the Lost Minds of Phandelver of painting minis.
You need 10, maybe 20 paints, a couple of paint brushes, and a couple of minis to paint. And that's the starting point for painting minis. That's the starter set. That's dipping your toe, seeing if you like the hobby, and seeing if that's something that you really want to devote some time and additional money to. And as you're going, you're gonna eventually buy some more paints, you're gonna buy some more minis, you're gonna keep spending time developing your skills. And eventually you may end up like our buddy Duncan Rhodes and just have a giant collection. And you know, Duncan could have about, I don't know, 20 dice towers on this table, but instead he has hundreds of painted minis that have given him enjoyment, that he could use in games, that he's used to develop his skills, that he's had fun painting. And it's a good hobby. You know, something else that happens as you get more and more into painting minis is you develop your hobby desk, you develop your workshop. So this is a picture of my desk I took just before coming to the convention. And it doesn't show everything, but I've got a ton of paints on there and paint brushes. I've got a perfect little place to put my paper towels. I got a bunch of lights on there. There's some minis hanging around. And any hobby where you are able to make a workshop for yourself is awesome. So if you, I don't know, like to do woodworking and you have a little workshop in your garage, that's great. If you really like to bake or cook and you have your kitchen set up just the way you want it and you have all the tools that you like in there and it's clean and it's organized, that's awesome. That's your zone, that's your dojo, that's your workshop. And any hobby that involves that is a good hobby in my book. So mini painting is flexible. The cost of the hobby can be whatever you want it to be. There's a low entry point. But as you get more and more into it, you can spend your money on things that really grow the hobby. More minis, more tools, more paints, things that you're legitimately going to get use out of. And you can go deep if you want to. For space requirements, again, flexible. When you start the hobby, it takes two shoe boxes. A shoebox for paints and a shoebox for your minis. That's the space requirements to start off with. As you get going, that'll expand. But that expansion comes with the fact that you're really getting deep and you're enjoying what you're doing. Flexible time commitment. So you can spend an hour a month painting minis, or you can spend every waking moment if that's what you want to do. If you have a 3-day weekend and you have no better plans, you can spend 3 days painting 10 or 20 goblins if that's what you want to do. The schedule is also flexible. You can spend 5 or 10 minutes before you go and catch the bus painting a model's pants blue, and then all you have to do is wash the brush and set it down to dry and just go and let the model dry, and that's actually going to be time well spent. Your model's going to be dry by the time you get back to it and ready to go. A lot of hobbies are not that flexible. If you really enjoy cooking and you're going to make some chicken, that's going to take you an hour. You can't stop cooking chicken halfway through. And by the same token, if you have a 3-day weekend, you can't spend 3 days cooking chicken. Like, it's going to cost too much money. And what are you going to do with all that chicken? All right. And again, mini painting can be as social as you want it to be. You can do online hangouts, you can get together with friends, you can go to the game store, you can play games, you can go to conventions. Origin story. So top left there, that is me as I want to say 11 years old. I was really into Star Wars customizable card game. That's a card game that came out after Magic the Gathering, but before the Pokemon card game. There were some licensing issues right after the Phantom Menace, and so unfortunately the game got discontinued, but for a few years there, I was very into it. I did not start by painting minis. I started by playing games. And we were good at this. This is Scry magazine, and I won a 20-person tournament up in northern Maine, and I got my picture and my name and my deck list printed in Scry magazine. And my buddy Robbie there in the bottom left, he got third place, so he got his name in Scry magazine, but he didn't get his deck list in there. Anyway, there's we'll call it 11-year-old Brent. Here's 13-year-old Brent, and you see that I have started down the games to art pipeline. So I've gone from card games to Warhammer. So met some friends who were into Warhammer. It was a very short step to go from one game in the game store to another game in the game store. But this new game opens up the world of art. So I think this is the Warhammer Fantasy box set that had Bretonnians and Lizardmen in there. And here we have some Bretonnian bowmen. These were not the very first models I ever painted, but they're pretty early on. This is middle school, maybe a freshman in high school, hard to say. And they're not good, but they're not bad. Now, I stand by that. They're not bad. Let's enhance. It's not good, but it's not bad. So on this model, looking at it, it's a little bit more maturity here. I'm seeing basically smooth coats of paint, good coverage, relatively neat and tidy. And yeah, there are color blocks that begin and end. And I admit that I mostly copied the box art here. And so some people will call this painting by numbers, or some people will call this like a 3D coloring book or a coloring book for nerds. And I'm actually fine with that description because I think it makes the point of how easy it can be to get into miniature painting. There's a little bit of skill involved in getting your paint on the brush and moving the paint around. But in terms of color placement, it's the same thought process that goes into a coloring book. You look at the shapes. What color is the dinosaur gonna be? What color is her belly gonna be? What color are her spots gonna be? And it's step by step by step. It's logical. These are easy choices. One flows into the other. And getting started with minis is not difficult, at least not at the basic level. These are a couple of models I painted within the last year. And the fundamentals are not that different. I decided, okay, half of the cloak is going to be purple and half is going to be jade. What color is her helmet going to be? What color is the pickaxe going to be? Again, it's identifying shapes, it's choosing logical colors, and it's applying them. Now, as I've gotten a little bit more advanced, there's a little more complexity here. I've gone through and I've highlighted some of those colors. I've put some shadows on some of those colors. And so if you just look at the teal, for example, there are darker shades of teal and there are brighter shades of teal on there. But the basic idea of dividing the model into shapes, putting the colors on the shapes, that's all pretty standard and pretty doable stuff. These models have a little bit more detail. If you look at trying to describe her model name is an archaeologician. She's an archaeologist in the world of Relic Blade, and the name is not a word that I regularly use. But she has a health potion, and on the model, it's just a little jar. I made the choice, that's going to be a health potion. That means I'm going to paint it red. And as I've gotten a little bit better, I've picked up some skills here and there, and I know that the liquid is a medium color red, that the empty part of the jar is either black or dark gray or a very dark red, and the meniscus of the liquid is a bright red. And so you learn things along the way, but the overall process doesn't have to be daunting or scary. Okay, so I want to show off a few more talented artists because I just spent some time saying that mini painting is like a coloring book. And I know that some people really do not like that comparison. So I want to make the point that there are absolutely real artists out there in the world who are not treating this like a coloring book. And I want to make sure that I'm giving them full and proper credit. So this is Instagram again. We've got Painting Myth here. And as you get better and better, you may develop a distinct painting style that is really you putting what you love into your paint jobs. And Painting Myth, something I noticed about her painting is it's kind of that comic book style. She makes really good use out of black ink to define and shape all of the objects on the mini. Moving on, this is Dice and Demons, and Emma absolutely has a style. And when I look at her work, I see a lot of textured color on those shapes. So the flat panels of that tank there, they're very, very visible brush strokes, and that's intentional, and it's well done, and it looks awesome. On the shoulder pad of that Space Marine, there are hash marks of a very bright highlight, and it looks great. It is a distinct style. It is far beyond just any coloring book comparison, and I love it. This is Craft World Studio again, and again, this is not a coloring book. One of the features that I notice when I look at their work is the colors in the shadows. So there's light and there's dark, and that spreads across the model, and there's a lot of like purples in the shadows, and that goes across everything, and just very fine, very detailed work, and recognizable who painted it. Finally, Sam Lenz. I just had a lot of color up on the board. Sam Lenz, he paints it a lot of different ways, but he's very good at realism and dark and gritty and spooky characters. All right. So talking about inspiration here and letting what interests you drive an art style. And since we're at a game convention, one of my favorite games of all time is Warcraft 2. And obviously an outstanding game, obviously, but also I love the colors and the art in this game. And so here's a screenshot where I'm playing as the blue humans, and I've picked up Alaria there, and we're gonna go fight those orange skeletons. Here's a screenshot where I'm playing as the black team humans, and the red team humans are coming to invade my base. And this is one of those moments where, as you're painting, you develop a little bit of art appreciation. And what I mean here is that I think it's really cool the way that the different teams in Warcraft have different accent colors. So a lot of the buildings and a lot of the characters are neutral colors, whether that's grays or browns, to mimic steel. And then they have shoulder pads that have a variable color. So the footmen in this picture, for my team, the footmen have a dark gray, and the opposing team has a bright red. And the archer has a red cloak for the opposing team, and if I had an archer, it would have a black cloak. Here I'm playing as the orange humans, and the roofs are all orange, and there are orange accent colors on my characters. And again, I just think it's such a clean, colorful style, and it makes me happy. And also I think it's fun that the way that they are incorporating accent colors here and there. Oh, blue humans versus the red orcs. Okay. World of Warcraft, I spent too much time on this. Some of the art design carries through between these games. Here I am flying over Stormwind, and something I love, again, is the way they've color-coded the roofs of the buildings. So the different districts in Stormwinds have different color roofs, and that applies everywhere else in the world of Warcraft as well. So here's a little farmhouse with a beautiful blue roof and a gnome. And here's the farmhouse in the background. And I've been painting my own buildings, my own resin terrain buildings. And I superimposed them there, and yeah, the colored roofs work. And there's some more, and that looks good too. And there's some more, and that, my friends, is how you make a YouTube thumbnail in PowerPoint. All right. Oh, there's my little village. Yeah, it looks good in those colors. Laying a lot of neutrals on all of the brickwork and the stucco, but the roofs, that's the accent color, and that's where we can do whatever we want. Love Rome Total War. I've played a lot of Total War games. Total War we can talk about for a couple of reasons. First off, the actual gameplay of the battles, the rank and flank style of battles, very reminiscent to a lot of tabletop war games, whether that's Warhammer Fantasy or Conquest, or any of the historical games, any of the rank and flank historical games. And of course, the other thing I love about Rome Total War, the first one, is the color palette. Rome Total War 2, inferior game for a lot of reasons. Very high on my list of why I don't like the sequel is because they went with a gritty and dirty color palette, realistic color palette. But the original Rome Total War, all right, there's your red colored Romans that really stick out from the terrain. If you play as a different family, you can play as the green family of Romans. I don't know if that was historical, but it looks amazing. You play as the third family, you can be the blue Romans. Again, I don't think they actually looked that awesome, but that looks awesome. And this wasn't a playable faction, but the Senate SPQR, they were purple. That looks good too. And so, of course, you can get minis for historicals. Here's a Roman soldier in purple. Looks great, love it. I fully intend to paint more Romans in the bright colors of the Rome Total War color palette. I haven't finished this project. We'll get there. We'll get there. Final game I want to mention. I love XCOM. I actually don't have anything to say one way or another about the art, but the gameplay is very, very reminiscent of a tabletop game. It is a grid-based movement system. You take turns moving your units around, you're trying to get to cover, you're trying to flank your opponents, you're trying to shoot your opponents when they're out of cover, and when you line up for a shot, the computer will say, okay, you have a 70% chance of making this shot, or you have a 20% chance of making this shot. Yeah, and the 70% shot will still miss, absolutely. Yeah. And that, it feels a lot like a tabletop game. And honestly, sometimes I really appreciate that the computer does the math and the rolling for me. That's kind of nice, actually. But dang, having some minis on a grid, it feels real good. If you paint some minis and put them down on a game board, that feels real good. And, you know, before I forget, I really think that this picture encapsulates a Renaissance person. I think if you are playing tabletop games with painted minis, that means you're thinking about tactics. If it's a role-playing game, you're thinking about storytelling. If there's dice involved, you're doing math. And if you've painted those minis, you're involved with sculpture and painting. So that kind of makes you a polymath. You're a Renaissance person, like you know, Leonardo da Vinci or any of the other turtles. And dang, that looks good. Painted minis can make any game better. And if you enjoy any tabletop game, any board game, any RPG, highly recommend giving painting a shot or telling your friends to give painting a shot. All right, we're getting towards the end here. The rewards of miniature painting. As you're sitting there and painting, you're lowering your stress, you're improving your health. It is sedentary, so that's not like great, but it is relaxing. You're sitting there, increasing your dexterity. There's also a sense of accomplishment. As you are improving at a skill, that feels good, and it should feel good. You've earned it, you deserve it. Your time you put into something translates to an increase in skill, a level up. That's awesome. And those skills sometimes are good for something else. So if you are working on models and you break something around your house, you have super glue, you know how to fix it. You have epoxy, you know how to fix it. Another transferable skill, and I'm not going to go too far out on a limb on this one, but this helps nerds dress themselves better. If you can paint a model that looks okay, you can understand why you should not wear a black belt with brown shoes. You can understand why you should not wear a brown belt with black shoes. Understanding color distributions, in theory, can help you dress yourself better. Sometimes. And yeah, that ties right into art appreciation. As you yourself become a little bit of an artist, you start to understand what goes into other art, whether that's art from games or tabletop RPGs or like an actual art museum. Dipping your toe a little bit, broadens your horizons. It's a good thing. And as you are accomplishing and as you are painting models and building your collection, that collection has meaning because you painted those models, you put your time into them, you can track the improvement from your first mini to your 100th mini. And that collection also doesn't take up that much space. The thing about miniatures is that they are small, and if you get thousands of miniatures, yeah, that takes up a lot of space. But you'd be surprised how far along you can get with just a shoebox and carefully packing your stuff away until you want to use it again. You get sweet game pieces, and you can make new friends. This can be a social activity if you want it to be. All right. It's often been said recently that we're in a golden age of games, a golden age of tabletop games and nerd hobbies, and I strongly believe that to be the case. It was the case before COVID. People say that there's been an uptick since then. I mean, I kind of felt the uptick around the time of Stranger Things, but nerd hobbies are more and more popular every year. This convention is bigger and bigger every year. I'm seeing lots of conventions grow. I'm seeing more and more new board games and RPGs all the time. And yeah, nerd hobbies are big now. You're allowed to like nerdy things, and cool people like nerdy things, and we're all cool in this room. So yeah, more and more and more board games are including miniatures. And that has become like a selling point for a lot of board games these days, is that there are miniatures in there. And I don't know if all the really hardcore Eurogame fans are excited about that, but as a mini painter, I love it. And yeah, you know, even as video games are getting better and better and better, analog games are still here, and they've become more and more popular, and that's despite changes in technology. But also, our hobbies are growing because of technology. We can communicate better, we can learn about new games, indie game sellers can get their wares out to the world, we can share tips and tricks about painting. The future isn't all bad. Yep, more and more conventions, and the hobby isn't going away. Like, D&D is 50 years old, Warhammer's 35 or something like that, 40, I don't know. And it's not going anywhere. It gets more and more popular. When you're older and grayer, this will still be here for you. The minis are analog, so nobody is going to turn off the server. Nobody is going to delete your collection. There's no DRM protection, so you can't sell your minis once you're done with them. So the secondary market is strong and thriving. You will be able to find miniatures in your old age, and you'll be able to find paint in your old age. This is something that you can do for a lifetime if you want to. And that's awesome. Okay, I guess that's the end of the presentation, but I will be right here again tomorrow at 2:30 and right here again the next day at 2:30. I've got a couple more panels talking about indie games tomorrow. And on Sunday here at 2:30, I'm going to try to teach a panel of 3 people who have never painted a model before how to paint models in 45 minutes. And we'll see how that goes. We'll get the AV team to see if they can hook up my camera so that I can show off what folks are working on. I think it's going to be great. And of course, I'm going to be spending a lot of time over at the Paint and Take if anyone wants to come and hang out and paint with me. So, yep. Thanks. This was a lovely weekend. I really enjoyed my time here at Too Many Games, and maybe I'll come back sometime. Also, I think this was an interesting experiment about what can and can't be done at live in-person conventions for miniature painting on stage. And yeah, I'm gonna have to think about this, think about what other options might be available, what other tweaks could be made, and of course, I welcome any suggestions that you have. Yeah, I think that's all I have for this time. So as always, thanks so much for watching.